The wind cut low across the graveyard, dragging a whisper of sand over the crooked stones. Caleb Hart knelt at the foot of a grave so worn with time the name had nearly vanished. But he didn't need the letters to know whose bones lay under the dry earth. Anna. His Anna. His hat sat low over his brow, shielding his eyes from the hard sun, but the heat did little to warm the cold knot in his chest. He pressed his palm flat against the cracked wood of the marker, rough as unspoken promises. "I'm still here," he muttered, the words rasping out like sand through a sieve. "Still making a mess of it." Behind him, Dry Creek baked under the noon sun, a scattering of warped buildings and crooked streets that hadn't seen rain in 6 months. The town was dying, same as everything else out here, and Caleb could feel it in his bones, the slow decay of things left too long under the weight of their own sorrow. He stood, boots grinding into the brittle grass, and turned toward the town. Every step felt heavier than the last. At the general store, Old Man Perkins leaned against a barrel, whittling nothing in particular. His knife paused as Caleb passed, but he said nothing. They all knew him, Caleb Hart, the man who once had a thriving ranch, a pretty wife, and a future carved from sweat and good fortune. Now he was just another broken soul hanging on because he didn't know what else to do. The saloon doors slapped against their frames as Caleb crossed the street. A trio of roughnecks lounged outside, their laughter sharp as glass. One of them, Billy Croft, tipped his hat with a mock flourish. "Mornin', widower," Billy called, voice dripping with the kind of mean humor that came easy to small men in forgotten towns. Caleb didn't look up, didn't slow. He just walked, each step grinding the dust deeper into his worn boots. At the blacksmith's, a knot of townsfolk had gathered, murmuring low like a swarm of locusts. Caleb caught scraps of their talk, words like "damn shame" and "bout time." Curiosity itched at the edge of his mind, but he pushed it down. He had chores to do, fences to mend, cattle to count that no longer answered when he called. But then he heard a name that stopped him cold. Mabel Whitlock. He turned, slow as molasses, and squinted at the knot of faces. "Left her for dead, they did," Perkins said, shaking his head. "Town council voted last night. Stripped her land, her claim. Said she's too old, can't work it no more. Not worth the trouble." "Old which should have died years ago," Billy chimed in. "Ain't no use in feeding ghosts." Laughter rippled through the crowd, mean and shallow. Caleb felt something tighten in his gut. Mabel Whitlock. He remembered her, though just barely. The old woman lived on the edge of the desert in a shack the wind threatened to carry off every spring. She hadn't set foot in town in years. Folks said she talked to herself, claimed she'd seen things out in the desert, things best left buried. They called her crazy, a relic from a time even the West wanted to forget. But she was still a human being. He turned back toward the livery, hands balling into fists. The anger wasn't clean, it was messy, tangled up with his own guilt, his own failures. Maybe that's why it burned so hot. He saddled his mare, a rangy sorrel with one bad leg, and swung up into the creaking saddle. He didn't stop to pack supplies. Didn't even bother to tell anyone where he was going. He just pointed his horse toward the desert and kicked her into a slow, limping trot. The sun fell lower as he rode, turning the sky a bruised purple. Dust rose from the cracked earth in lazy spirals, and the heat clung to him like a second skin. His canteen bumped against his hip, half empty, but he didn't think about thirst. Only about the woman left to die because she didn't fit neatly into the town's idea of useful. By the time he spotted the shack, night was bleeding into the sky. It huddled against a dune like a wounded animal, one corner caved in, the roof patched with old tarps and scrap tin. Smoke curled from a crooked stovepipe, a thin, stubborn thread. He reined in and dismounted stiffly. His shoulder throbbed from an old injury he never bothered fixing, but he ignored it and trudged the last few yards on foot. The door hung ajar, its hinges groaning with every breath of wind. Caleb hesitated on the threshold, then rapped his knuckles against the frame. A voice like rusted wire snapped from inside. "Get on if you're here to gawk." Caleb pushed the door open and stepped into the gloom. Mabel Whitlock sat by a crooked stove, wrapped in a patchwork quilt. Her hair was a wild halo of white, her face a craggy map of years and sorrows. Her eyes, though sharp and bright as shattered glass, pinned him to the spot. "You look like hell warmed over," she said. Caleb almost smiled. "Almost. I came to talk," he said. She snorted, a dry, humorless sound. "Ain't had visitors in 7 years. Don't need one now. You need a place to go." Her eyes narrowed. "You offering pity, Hart?" "No," he shook his head, dust cascading from the brim of his hat. "Offering a deal." Mabel leaned forward, quilt sliding from her bony shoulders. Ain't got nothing you want, boy? Caleb met her gaze, steady as he could manage. Neither do I. For a long moment the only sound was the crackle of the stove. Outside the wind howled like a living thing. Finally Mabel pushed herself upright, leaning on a crooked cane. Well, she said, voice softer but no less sharp, you better come inside proper then. No sense lettin' the cold eat us both. He stepped fully into the shack and let the door slam shut behind him. The place smelled of smoke, dust, and stubbornness. An old shotgun rested by the door. A tattered Bible lay open on the table, pages fluttering in the draft. Mabel poured 2 cups of something that might once have been coffee and set one in front of him with a clink. Let's hear it then, she said, settling back into her chair. Caleb wrapped his hands around the cup, feeling the heat seep into his bones. He chose his words carefully, knowing once spoken, there'd be no taking them back. I can't run Heart's End alone anymore. Land's gone fallow. Fences are down. Town's ready to pick it clean soon as I give up the ghost. He paused, feeling the weight of it all settle on his shoulders. I figure, maybe 2 folks broken clean through might still have a fighting chance. Mabel stared at him, her eyes unreadable. You asking me to marry you? The absurdity of it hit him then, and for the first time in a long time Caleb laughed, a dry, ragged sound pulled straight from his hollow chest. Yeah, he said. Guess I am. Mabel's mouth twitched, the ghost of a smile. She sipped her coffee, staring at him over the rim. Boy, she said, you're either the dumbest man this side of the Rockies or the last decent one. Could be both. They sat in silence after that, the kind that wasn't awkward but heavy with possibility. Outside, the wind died down and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Mabel set her cup down with a decisive thump. Ain't got no use for romance, mind you. Neither do I, Caleb said. Ain't got no dowry. Ain't got no land. Ain't got nothin' but a bad back and a mean disposition. Caleb tipped his hat back and looked her square in the eye. Sounds like just what I need. The old woman barked a laugh then, harsh and free. Well then, Hart, she said, extending one gnarled hand, let's be fools together. He took her hand, rough against his calloused palm, and they shook on it. Not lovers. Not dreamers. Survivors. Outside, the last light of day bled out behind the hills, leaving only darkness and stars and a future neither of them had dared imagine. In the hills, unseen by either, a shadow watched with eyes full of hunger. They married at dawn with the desert wind as their only witness. No preacher, no church, no ring. Just Caleb, Mabel, and the wide, indifferent sky stretching out overhead. Caleb tied a piece of rawhide around Mabel's thin wrist like a bracelet, and she touched his calloused hand with surprising gentleness. They spoke no vows. In a place like Dry Creek, a word given was enough. By mid-morning they were riding back to Heart's End, a ranch in name only, a battered house and 2 outbuildings, a windmill that groaned with every turn. Caleb watched Mabel out of the corner of his eye as they rode. She sat straight in the saddle despite her years, her gaze steady on the horizon. You sure you can handle it? He asked after a while, nodding toward the broken fence lines and thirsty fields that waited for them. Mabel gave a low grunt. Boy, I handled worse than this when you were still learning to piss straight. Caleb chuckled, the sound rough in his throat. He hadn't realized how much he missed someone talking back. When they reached the ranch house, Mabel slid off her horse with a grunt and surveyed the property like a general inspecting a battlefield. Livestock? She asked, eyes sharp. 2 cows, a half-blind mule, and a chicken meaner than rattlesnake spit. Mabel snorted. We'll manage. She marched up the steps to the house, cane clicking against the weather-beaten boards, and Caleb followed, feeling something unfamiliar start to stir in his chest. Not hope, not yet, but something like it, a slow, tentative awakening. Inside, the house smelled of dust, old wood, and loneliness. Caleb had stopped caring about cleaning years ago. There were dishes left to dry in sinks filled with cracked mud, a fireplace half-choked with ash, furniture draped in old sheets. Mabel stood in the doorway for a long moment, taking it all in. Then she set her jaw and rolled up the sleeves of her battered shirt. First things first, she said. This place smells like dead dreams. Open the damn windows. They worked side by side until their bodies ached. Mabel tore through the house like a storm, sweeping out dust, beating rugs, scrubbing soot from the hearth. Caleb mended a broken shutter, patched the sagging porch steps, and dug out the root cellar he hadn't touched since Anna died. There were no soft words between them, no easy smiles. Only the scrape of effort, the grunt of exertion, the rhythm of 2 stubborn souls refusing to give up. By nightfall, the house felt lighter somehow, as if their labor had scraped away not just dirt, but grief. Caleb sat by the fire, cradling a chipped mug of coffee. Mabel lowered herself carefully into the chair opposite him, a wet cloth tied around her hair to keep the dust out. For a time they just sat, listening to the fire crackle, the old house settling around them like an aging dog. Then Mabel spoke, her voice low and steady. "You think you're the only one who's lost something, Dot?" Caleb looked at her, really looked. The deep lines etched into her face, the tired set of her shoulders, the way her hands never quite stopped moving even when resting. "No," he said quietly. "I reckon grief's the only thing left plenty around here." She nodded, staring into the flames. "Had a boy once. Jesse. Smart as a whip, mouth full of dreams. Rode off to fight in the war and never rode back." The fire popped, sending a thin wisp of ash into the air. "I'm sorry," Caleb said, and meant it. Mabel shrugged, but the motion was tight, brittle. "We all carry graves inside us, Hart. Some just get heavier than others." Caleb sipped his coffee, the bitterness grounding him. "Why stay out here all this time?" he asked. Mabel's lips twisted into something almost like a smile. "Out here my ghost got room to breathe." Outside the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Caleb felt the weight of the day settle into his bones, but beneath it, a stubborn flicker of something warmer, something stronger. The next morning they set to work on the ranch. Fences first. Caleb hammered posts back into the ground while Mabel steadied them with surprising strength. They worked without speaking much, falling into an easy rhythm, broken only by Mabel's sharp cursing whenever the mule wandered into the wrong field. Midway through the morning, Billy Croft and two of his cronies rode up, dust rising from their horses like smoke. "Well, well," Billy drawled, swinging down from his saddle. "Ain't this a sweet little setup? Old Man Hart and the town witch playin' house." His friends laughed, the sound grating. Caleb straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. His fists itched, but he kept them at his sides. "Don't recall invitin' you out here, Billy?" Billy sauntered closer, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Just thought we'd pay respects to the newlyweds. Mighty generous of you, Hart, takin' in charity cases." Mabel leaned on her cane, her eyes like twin nails. "You boys got somewhere else to be?" she asked, voice sharp as a whip crack. Billy sneered. "Place like this ain't worth saving. You'll both be dead or gone by winter." Caleb stepped forward, slow and deliberate, closing the distance until only inches separated them. "This land's mine," he said, voice low and steady. "And anyone tries to take it, they'll find I ain't near as broken as they think." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Billy chuckled and backed off, spitting into the dirt. "Suit yourself," he said. "See you round, Hart." They rode off in a cloud of dust, leaving the ranch silent but for the sigh of the wind. Mabel clucked her tongue. "Idiots," she said. Caleb watched the dust settle, feeling something coil tight in his gut. Trouble wasn't done with them yet. He could smell it on the air, taste it in the grit on his tongue. That night, as they ate beans and cornbread by firelight, Mabel said, "You know they'll come back." Caleb nodded. "They'll come when they think we're weakest." Mabel smiled, a fierce, grim thing. "Well," she said, "they're in for a surprise." They spent the next day shoring up defenses. Caleb fixed the barn doors, reinforced the windows. Mabel taught him how to rig crude alarms with tripwires and tin cans, tricks she claimed she'd learned fighting off claim jumpers decades ago. Between the chores and the preparations, something began to grow between them, a partnership born not of romance but of grit and stubborn will. Mabel never softened, never played the part of doting wife. She cursed like a miner, argued like a lawyer, and worked like a mule. Caleb found he preferred it that way. He wasn't looking for comfort. He was looking for someone who understood that survival was a kind of love, too. One evening, as they sat under the stars, Mabel pulled a battered harmonica from her pocket and played a tune so mournful it made Caleb's chest ache. When she finished, he said, "You're a hard woman, Mabel Whitlock." She snorted. "Takes a hard woman to survive a soft world gone sour." The fire crackled between them, casting their faces in shifting light. Caleb stared into the flames and realized with a jolt of wonder that for the first time in years, he wasn't just enduring each day. He was living it. Outside the circle of light, beyond the edges of safety, danger stirred, gathering like storm clouds on the horizon. But for now they had a home. A fragile peace. And they would defend it with everything they had left. The attack came 3 nights later, under a sickle moon and a sky smeared with blood-colored clouds. Caleb had just doused the lanterns when he heard the first footstep crunch against the gravel outside. He froze, heart hammering. Beside him, Mabel cocked her head like a hound scenting trouble. Without a word, she slipped the old shotgun into his hands and grabbed the pistol from the mantel. Another crunch. Then another. Shadows pooled around the porch steps. Caleb sucked in a slow breath, his palms sweating against the gun stock. "Wait," Mabel whispered. "Wait, till you see the whites of their teeth." The door rattled once, twice, then burst inward with a crash. 3 men rushed in, silhouetted by the flickering firelight. Caleb pulled the trigger, the shotgun bucking against his shoulder. One of the intruders screamed and dropped, clutching his leg. The others swore and fanned out, knives flashing. Mabel didn't hesitate. She fired at the ceiling to disorient them, then swung her cane in a wide arc, catching one square across the jaw. The man stumbled, dazed. Caleb charged him, ramming the shotgun stock into his gut. Outside, horses whinnied and bootsteps thundered. More were coming. Back to the pantry. Mabel barked, already moving. Caleb hauled the pantry door shut just as gunfire erupted from outside, bullets chewing into the walls like angry hornets. They barricaded themselves behind sacks of grain and rusted tools, listening to the chaos unfold. "We can't hold him forever," Caleb muttered, checking the shells in his shotgun. Only 3 left. Mabel's eyes gleamed in the dim light, sharp and ferocious. Long enough. Footsteps thudded down the hall. Someone tried the pantry door, found it jammed, and cursed. Another blast of gunfire tore a hole in the boards inches from Caleb's head. He gritted his teeth, heart pounding like a drumbeat. There was no cavalry coming. No sheriff. No neighbors willing to lift a hand for the broken cowboy and the town pariah. It was just them. A heavy body slammed into the door again, splintering it. Caleb raised his shotgun, but Mabel shook her head. "Save your shot," she whispered. The third slam shattered the door completely. A man lunged through, swinging a crowbar. Caleb ducked low and fired from the hip. The blast knocked the attacker backward in a spray of dust and blood. Caleb fumbled for another shell, but Mabel was already moving, firing the pistol with grim precision. The second man dropped with a cry. For a breathless moment there was silence. Then the third man, a burly figure with a battered hat and a scar twisting across his mouth, stepped through the smoke. Billy Croft. He leveled a revolver at them, lip curled in a sneer. "Well, ain't this a picture?" he drawled. 2 relics playing soldier. Caleb stepped forward, blocking Mabel with his body. "This ain't your land, Billy." Billy chuckled low and mean. "It ain't yours either. It belongs to whoever's strong enough to take it." The gun in his hand twitched. Mabel didn't wait. She hurled her empty pistol like a thrown stone, striking Billy's wrist. The shot went wide, burying itself harmlessly into the ceiling. Caleb sprang forward, driving his shoulder into Billy's gut. They hit the floor hard, grappling, fists flying. Billy was bigger, meaner, fueled by rage. Caleb fought with desperation, with the memory of Anna and the memory of days too bitter to count. Blows landed, hot and wet. Blood spattered the dusty floorboards. Billy pulled a knife, the blade catching the firelight in a wicked gleam. Mabel moved with the speed of a rattlesnake, slamming her cane down on Billy's wrist with a sickening crack. The knife clattered away. Caleb seized the opening, driving his fist into Billy's jaw with all the strength he had left. Billy slumped, unconscious. Panting, Caleb staggered back, wiping blood from his mouth. Mabel stood over Billy's crumpled form, chest heaving. "What now?" Caleb rasped. Mabel's face was hard as stone. "We bury the bastards in their own failure." In the bleak light of dawn, they tied Billy and the other attackers to their horses and sent them riding back toward town, battered and broken, a message clear as thunder. Heart's End would not fall. Caleb watched them disappear over the horizon, a fierce pride burning in his gut. For the first time in years he realized he wasn't just surviving. He was fighting. They spent the day repairing the damage. Mabel stitched Caleb's torn brow with ruthless efficiency, muttering curses under her breath the whole time. "Next time," she said, tying off the last knot, "you duck faster." Caleb grinned through the pain. "Yes, ma'am." As the sun set, painting the sky in gold and crimson, they stood side by side on the porch, surveying their battered but unbroken homestead. Mabel sipped a cup of coffee, grimacing at the taste. "We'll have to trade for better beans," she said. Caleb chuckled. "We'll manage." A comfortable silence stretched between them, filled only by the creak of the windmill and the distant lowing of the cows. Mabel turned to him, her face serious. "They'll come back, Hart. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not next week. But men like Croft don't let go easy." Caleb nodded, the weight of her words settling heavy in his chest. "I know." She fixed him with a hard stare. "You ready for that?" Caleb thought of Anna's grave, of the years he'd wasted letting sorrow eat him alive. He thought of Mabel, fierce and stubborn, refusing to lie down and die just because the world told her to. He thought of Heart's End, the dust, the blood, the brittle hope curling stubbornly in the dry earth. "I'm ready," he said. Mabel's mouth twitched into a rare, approving smile. "Good." The stars came out, sharp and brilliant in the cold sky. Together they sat on the porch, weapons within easy reach, shoulders brushing. Two broken souls stitched together by necessity, defiance, and a sliver of something almost like faith. Inside, the fire burned low but steady. Outside, the wild whispered its threats. And somewhere beyond the hills, the next storm gathered strength. But tonight, Heart's End still stood. And so did they. Spring came late to Heart's End, as if the land itself had forgotten how to hope. But when it came, it unfurled in stubborn bursts, wildflowers clawing up through the dry soil, green shoots piercing the battered earth like spears. Caleb stood at the edge of the pasture, hat in hand, watching a newborn calf wobble on unsteady legs. The sun beat down, harsh and brilliant, gilding the land with a beauty so fierce it almost hurt to look at. Mabel hobbled up beside him, squinting against the glare. "Well," she said, voice rough with something close to wonder, "damned if it ain't growin'." Caleb smiled, slow and genuine. "So are we." The ranch had changed. They had changed. Word of Billy Croft's humiliating defeat had spread like wildfire. Other ranchers, long silent, began stopping by Heart's End, some offering fence posts, others trading supplies, a few just tipping their hats in silent respect. It wasn't friendship yet, but it was a start. Mabel had taken over the root cellar, stocking it with jars of preserves, bolts of cloth, even a battered phonograph she'd salvaged from a junk wagon. At night, scratchy music floated up from the house, blending with the sigh of the wind. Caleb rebuilt the barn with new lumber, sturdy and strong. He mended fences, planted rows of corn and beans, repaired the battered windmill. Each nail he hammered, each seed he sowed, stitched him closer to the life he'd thought forever lost. One evening, as the sun melted into a sea of gold and crimson, a rider appeared on the ridge. Caleb's gut tensed, hand drifting to the rifle resting against the porch. Mabel saw the movement and shook her head. "Wait." The rider was young, barely more than a boy, with a dust-covered satchel slung over one shoulder. He rode down slow, cautious, hands visible. Caleb stepped forward, squinting. The boy pulled up, nervous. "Name's Jesse Whitlock," he said, voice cracking slightly. "Looking for Mabel Whitlock. She here?" Mabel's cane slipped from her hand, clattering against the porch. For a moment she just stood there, frozen. Then she moved, faster than Caleb would have thought possible, crossing the yard with long, limping strides. She stopped before the boy, staring up at him like she was afraid he might vanish if she blinked. "My Jesse's dead," she said hoarsely. The boy dismounted slowly, tears already tracking through the dust on his cheeks. "No, ma'am," he said, voice breaking. "I'm his son." Mabel swayed. Caleb caught her elbow, steadying her. "My pa," the boy continued, fumbling in the satchel. "He wrote this before he passed. Told me if I ever needed a place to find you." He pulled out a crumpled letter, held it out with shaking hands. Mabel took it, staring down at the worn paper like it was a holy relic. Silence stretched, deep and reverent. Finally she looked up, eyes blazing. "You got a name, boy?" "Matthew, ma'am. Matthew Whitlock." Mabel nodded, slow and deliberate. "Well, Matthew Whitlock," she said, voice steady now, "looks like you found your place." Caleb watched them, a lump thickening in his throat. He felt it then, the deep, bone-deep understanding that loss didn't have to be the end. Sometimes, if you were stubborn enough, if you fought hard enough, something new could bloom in the ruins. Matthew settled into the ranch like he'd been born to it, full of energy and questions. He helped mend the fences, fed the stock, even coaxed the mean old chicken into tolerating his presence. In him, Caleb saw echoes of his own lost son, a boy who might have grown into a man if fate had been kinder. And in Mabel, he saw a fierce kind of joy slowly return, brittle at first but growing stronger by the day. They weren't a perfect family. Far from it. They bickered, they cursed, they stumbled over old wounds and new misunderstandings. But they endured. Summer burned over the land, baking the fields to hard clay, testing their resolve. Storms tore through the ranch, ripping at fences and scattering tools across the yard. Each time they rebuilt. Each time they stood a little taller. The final test came on a sweltering August night. Billy Croft returned, not with a gang, but with a lawyer's letter and a smug smile. "You're trespassing," Billy said, tossing the letter at Caleb's boots. "Turns out your deed's invalid." This land's mine by rights now. Caleb didn't bend down to pick it up. He simply stared at Billy, a quiet, dangerous calm settling over him. Mabel stepped forward, cane tapping against the porch boards. "This land ain't yours, Billy," she said. Billy sneered. "You old witch got no say in it. Law's on my side." Caleb's voice was soft, deadly. "You want this land so bad, Billy? You'll have to take it with your own 2 hands. For a heartbeat, Billy hesitated. He wasn't a stupid man. He saw the way Caleb stood, the quiet readiness in Matthew's stance, the shotgun leaning casual and loaded by the door. Billy spat into the dirt, hate burning in his eyes. "This ain't over, Hart." "No," Caleb agreed. "It's just beginning. Billy mounted his horse and rode off into the darkness, a hollow man clinging to dying power. Caleb picked up the letter, glanced at it, and smiled. For sloppy work too. The law would chew Billy up and spit him out soon enough. The next morning, Caleb, Mabel, and Matthew rode into town together, heads high, eyes steady. They walked into the courthouse, filed the new deed Mabel had hidden away years ago, a deed now notarized, official, unbreakable. Hart's End was theirs. Truly, finally theirs. The sun shone down as they rode home, the dust rising in golden plumes around them. At the crest of the final hill, Caleb reined in and looked down at the ranch. The house stood proud, windows glinting. The barn, freshly painted, gleamed against the dry fields. The windmill turned slow and steady in the breeze, singing a song of survival. Mabel rode up beside him, a faint smile tugging at her weathered face. "Well," she said, "reckon we done it?" Caleb nodded, emotion swelling too big for words. He looked at Matthew riding ahead, full of life and stubborn promise. He looked at Mabel, scarred and strong, a testament to the kind of courage that refused to die. He looked at Hart's End, blooming like a miracle in the dust. And he knew, in the deepest marrow of his bones, that this was what Anna would have wanted. Not despair. Not surrender. But life. Messy, painful, beautiful life. He touched the brim of his hat in silent salute to the heavens. "Thank you," he whispered, the words snatched away by the wind. They rode down into the valley together, a family forged in loss and reborn in the stubborn green of hope. The dust of yesterday had settled. And from it, something fierce and unbreakable had grown. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep the spirit of Hart's End alive, through every storm, every struggle, and every stubborn, beautiful victory. The wind kicked up dust devils across the station platform, hurling grit into the eyes of anyone foolish enough to stand still. But she didn't move. Clara stood rooted, her white dress stained with soot from the train's engine and her veil limp in the dry breeze. The iron beast that had delivered her was already gone, retreating into the vast desert like it was ashamed of what it had left behind. He watched her from a distance, sitting on his saddle with the reins loose in one hand and his hat dipped low against the rising sun. Samuel Cooper had seen a lot of things in the West. Death, betrayal, even the ghost of mercy now and then, but a bride standing abandoned at a train station was new. And yet, something about it felt familiar. Like watching a calf wait for a mother long taken by wolves. She was beautiful, but not in the way the saloon girls painted themselves. Her face was soft, edges rounded with hope not yet broken, but today might change that. People began to whisper behind her. The station master offered her a look, half pity, half suspicion. No one stepped forward. No one asked her if she was all right. Samuel tugged on the brim of his hat and turned his horse toward the road, but the image of her stayed like a thorn behind his eye. 2 miles down the trail, he heard the sound of hooves, fast, uneven. He dismounted, rifle in hand, expecting bandits or maybe another drunk ranch hand looking to pick a fight. Instead he saw her. Claire. Veil gone, dress gathered in her hands, boots thick with dust. She had run after him. "I don't have anywhere else," she said, voice dry as the road. He looked at her long and slow. "That ain't my problem." "No," she said, straightening her back despite the tremble in her arms. "But you're the first man I've seen who didn't look at me like I was something left in the dirt." Samuel didn't answer. He turned, mounted again, and began to ride off. But her voice followed him. "He promised me we'd marry today. He wrote letters. Said he had land, stock, a future. But he never showed. The station master said he'd skipped town last week. Said he was seen with a redhead headed south." He stopped, barely turned his head. "What's your name?" "Clara. Clara Reynolds. Go back to town." "There's nothing for me there," she said. "They've already decided what I am." Samuel looked to the horizon. A storm was building far off, black clouds rising like smoke above the hills. People always decide quick. Gives them less to think about. She stared at him, eyes filled with something between challenge and desperation. You think I'm lying? He didn't answer that either. That night, Clara sat in the corner of the station house, knees pulled to her chest. Laughter spilled from the saloon. Men drank, gambled, and spat jokes loud enough for her to hear. One of them called her Runaway Rose. Another asked how much a wedding night cost if no groom showed up. When she stepped outside for air, 3 shadows followed. One grabbed her arm, another made a joke about bridal favors. The third reached for her dress. Then came the crack, sharp and final. A warning shot struck the dirt inches from their feet. Samuel stood at the end of the road, rifle leveled but eyes calm. The men scattered like coyotes in a lantern's glow. Clara fell to her knees, breath ragged, dress torn at the shoulder. Get up, Samuel said, approaching slowly. This town eats weakness. You came back, she said, voice thin. No, he said. I never left. She didn't understand, but she didn't ask. He offered her a canteen. She drank, wiped her mouth and whispered, "Thank you." The sheriff arrived 5 minutes too late, smelling like whiskey and regret. "Cooper," he muttered. "You causing trouble again?" Samuel didn't answer. Sheriff squinted at Clara. "You all right, miss?" She nodded, but her voice cracked when she said, "Yes, sheriff." The sheriff spit into the dust. "Better stay indoors from now on. Town's got a short fuse lately." He looked at Samuel. "You keep dragging trouble around, folks might stop giving you the benefit." Samuel waited until the lawman ambled away, then looked down at Clara. "You need a husband. I've got a roof." She blinked. "What?" "I don't talk much. Don't got silver words like your runaway. But I got food. I got work. You want out of this place, that's the deal. Marriage? You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said. "You got fire in you. Fire can burn or keep warm. Depends how you feed it." She stood. "Why are you doing this?" He hesitated just for a breath. Then said, "Sometimes it's better to save someone than let yourself drown." They rode in silence under the darkening sky. The storm had arrived, rolling over the plains like an army. Rain spat sideways, but Samuel's horse pressed forward steady and sure. Clara clung to the saddle, her arms wrapped tight around a man she did not know, heading toward a future she couldn't imagine. When they reached the ranch, it was less than she expected and more than she feared. A single-story cabin, warped fence line, a barn that leaned like it was tired of standing. No livestock in sight except one skinny cow and a mule with attitude. She stepped down, boots sinking into mud. Samuel dismounted, led the horse into the barn, and returned without a word. "You live here alone?" "Used to be 5 of us. Then 3. Then me." She looked at him, water dripping from her hair. "What happened?" He didn't meet her eyes. "The West happened." Inside, the house was clean but empty. No photos on the wall, no curtains on the windows. A fire burned low in the hearth. He pointed to the spare room. "That's yours. Door locks from the inside. Don't worry." "I wasn't," she lied. That night, thunder rolled and the roof creaked. Clara sat on the bed, still in her damp wedding dress. She found herself crying, not the loud, gasping kind, but the quiet tears that sneak out when the soul gives up trying to hold them in. She didn't hear Samuel approach, but suddenly he was standing in the hall. "I ain't gonna touch you. Not unless you ask me to." She looked at him. "You think I'm worried about that?" He shrugged. "Wouldn't blame you if you were. You always this good with women?" His mouth curled at the edge. "Don't have much practice." She lay down after he left, listening to the wind howl and wondering what kind of man marries a stranger just to give her shelter. Then again, what kind of woman says yes? Before she drifted off to sleep, she whispered into the dark, "Thank you, Samuel Cooper." He didn't answer. But on the other side of the wall, he sat awake in his chair, staring at a photograph no longer on the mantel. Outside, the storm raged on. And someone, somewhere, had taken note of the marriage that should never have happened. The sun rose blood-red over the plains the next morning, casting the landscape in a light that felt more like warning than warmth. Clara stood in the yard, sleeves rolled to her elbows, eyes on the east. Her wedding dress had been traded for a plain blue blouse and a cotton skirt, a borrowed outfit from a trunk in the attic. It smelled faintly of cedar and old grief. Samuel emerged from the barn, wiping oil from his hands. He didn't speak, didn't look at her. Just handed her a pair of worn leather gloves. "Why gloves?" she asked, eyeing them. "You married a man with a busted fence line and starving animals," he said. "Gloves come before flowers." They worked side by side through the morning, fixing rails, hauling feed, digging out the collapsed corner of the chicken coop. Clara moved with quiet determination, stumbling through tasks she'd never done but refusing to ask for help. Her hands bled by noon, her blouse soaked with sweat. Still she didn't quit. Samuel watched her from the corner of his eye, not out of curiosity but calculation. Most folks broke by mid-morning. She didn't. She cursed under her breath when she hit her thumb with the hammer, laughed once when the mule kicked over the water bucket, and told the cow to go to hell when it tried to bite her apron. "You're not like the others," he said as they shared a drink from the pump. "What others?" "The ones who come out here looking for a fairy tale. I stopped believing in fairy tales when my father sold our piano to pay a whiskey debt." They didn't speak for a long while after that. But something had shifted like a hinge unstuck. At dusk the preacher came. He was a thin man with a face like old leather and a voice roughened by wind and whiskey. He rode a mule and carried a Bible worn to the bone. Samuel had sent for him that morning with a one-line message, "Bring your book." She said yes. The ceremony took place beneath the cottonwood tree by the well. No guests. No rings. The mule stood witness with the chickens. The preacher mumbled scripture, coughed twice, then looked between them with something close to pity. "Do you take this woman, Clara Reynolds, to be your lawful wife?" Samuel nodded. "Do you take this man, Samuel Cooper, to be your lawful husband?" Clara hesitated just for a second. Then she said, "Yes," and meant it more than she thought she would. The preacher closed his Bible and said, "Well, there you go." Clara glanced at Samuel. "Is that it?" "Out here we don't waste time," the preacher said, mounting his mule. "God's watching. That's all that counts." As the preacher rode off, Clara turned to Samuel. "You didn't kiss me." He looked down, awkward. "Didn't seem right." "Not yet." They shared stew by the fire that night, speaking little. The silence between them had grown more comfortable, less like a wall and more like a blanket. He asked her where she was from. She asked if he had any family left. He answered by pulling a weathered photo from his coat. A young woman, hair tied back in a ribbon, and a boy no older than 5. "My wife Sarah," he said. "And Jake?" "My boy." "They're gone?" He nodded, jaw clenched. "What happened?" "Fever took her. River took him." Clara held the photo gently. "You loved them." "I still do." She didn't return the photo. Instead, she set it on the mantel where it belonged. Then she said, "I never got to love anyone. Closest I came was writing letters to a man who turned out to be a liar." Samuel looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. "Then maybe this ain't the worst place to start." Days turned into a rhythm. Mornings were for fixing, afternoons for feeding, evenings for trying to talk without flinching. Clara learned to milk the cow and gut fish. Samuel repaired the roof and rebuilt the broken porch swing. She found herself humming while sweeping the floor, catching him watching her from the doorway with a look that wasn't quite affection but wasn't indifference either. But not all was quiet. At night, Samuel took his rifle and walked the property, eyes sharp on the ridgeline. Clara asked him why once. He just said, "Old debts." One morning she found strange boot tracks near the barn. Not his. Not hers. Something fresh, dug deep in the mud. When she asked him about it, he said, "Coyotes, maybe?" She didn't believe him. Then there was the map. It was buried under a loose floorboard in the pantry, wrapped in oilcloth, brittle and yellowed. Lines drawn in black ink, an X marked near the Red River bend. Alongside it were letters, written in a woman's hand. Sarah's. Clara confronted Samuel at the well, holding the map like a weapon. "You said you had nothing left." "I don't." "Then what's this?" He took it from her, staring at it like a ghost had risen from the page. "That's the reason Clyde Merrick killed my cattle, burned my barn and shot my brother in the back. They think I've got Confederate gold buried out here." "Do you?" He met her eyes. "No. But Sarah believed her father left it behind. After she died I burned the map. Or thought I did. Guess I couldn't go through with it." "Why hide it?" "Because gold's a sickness. People kill for it. They already have." Clara folded the map, slid it back into the cloth and handed it to him. "Then burn it for real." That night he did. But burning the past doesn't mean it won't come back. Later that week the sheriff rode out. He wasn't alone. "There's men in town asking questions," he said, dismounting. "Clyde Merrick's back. Says you owe him something." Samuel's jaw tightened. "I don't owe that bastard a thing." "He doesn't see it that way," the sheriff said. "He's got 6 riders and they're all itching for a fight. Then tell him to stay off my land." "I'll try," the sheriff muttered, mounting again. but I ain't risking my life for buried rumors. When he left, Clara looked at Samuel. Who is Clyde? Old enemy. Will he come here? Samuel's eyes narrowed. Eventually. That night, Clara locked the doors and sat by the fire with a shotgun across her lap. She didn't sleep. Neither did he. In the morning, she found Samuel at the grave under the cottonwood. 2 wooden crosses, one freshly cleaned. He didn't notice her approach until she was standing beside him. You talk to them? She asked softly. Every morning. What do you say? That I'm sorry. That I still see their faces. That I'm trying. Clara knelt beside him. You're not alone anymore, Samuel. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time his hand reached out and found hers. Weathered, scarred fingers closing around her softer ones. I married you to give you a way out, he said. But now I'm thinking, maybe you were mine. Before she could answer, a gunshot cracked through the hills. He stood fast, eyes on the ridge. Clara didn't flinch. She reached for the rifle beside the door. Looks like they're here, she said. Samuel nodded. And we're not running. The wind kicked up again. Dust rose. The horizon blurred with heat and tension. And somewhere beyond the trees, Clyde Merrick grinned. The horses came slow at first, just silhouettes on the hill, black against the bruised sky. Clara stood at the window, pulse thudding in her ears. She counted 6 riders, maybe 7, hard to tell in the shifting light. Dust trailed behind them like smoke from a fire, and it might as well have been. Samuel stepped out onto the porch, rifle slung low, sidearm loose in the holster. His stance wasn't that of a man looking for a fight, but one who'd already lived through too many. Clara moved to follow, but he held up a hand without looking back. Stay inside. I won't hide, she said. He didn't argue. He just said, then stand where you can shoot straight. She took her place behind the woodpile near the cabin's corner, shotgun propped against her knee. Her breath came steady, but her hands trembled. The riders drew near, horses snorting, hooves striking hard into dry earth. At the front was Clyde Merrick, face all sharp angles and sun scars, eyes like a snake that had forgotten how to blink. He rode a jet-black stallion and wore a duster flapping open over a pearl-handled revolver. Well now, he said, voice slick with venom. Ain't this a picture? The widowmaker himself, Samuel Cooper. Heard you'd gone soft. Guess the rumors were wrong. I hear you've been spreading them, Samuel said. Clyde grinned. Man's got to pass time somehow. Especially when he's chasing ghosts and gold. There's no gold. Could have fooled me. Word is, your dead wife's daddy stole half a Confederate payroll and buried it out here. Seems mighty strange that you're still guarding a patch of dust if there ain't nothing under it. Samuel didn't blink. You bring all these men to dig? Nah. Brought them to watch me collect. Clara stepped out then, shotgun steady, eyes hard. You'll collect lead, Mr. Merrick? Clyde's grin faded as his eyes fell on her. Well now, what's this? A new bride, is it? She got any idea what she's tied herself to? I know enough, Clara said. Clyde chuckled. She's pretty? Shame. Samuel stepped forward, slow and deliberate. You've made your point. You want blood, try me. But you step 1 foot on this land, I'll put you down. A younger man to Clyde's left shifted in his saddle. You really willing to die over a lie, Cooper? Samuel's voice was stone. I've already died for worse. For a moment, time stretched tight like a wire. Hands hovered near holsters. Horses stomped and snorted, catching their riders' tension. Then Clyde lifted his hand. We ain't gonna spill guts today. Not yet. You got 1 week. Either show me proof the gold ain't here or I start digging. And if I find anything, even a rusty bullet casing, I take the whole damn ranch. You try, Samuel said, and I'll bury you under it. Clyde leaned down in his saddle. I'm not the one with a wife to lose. He turned, rode off, the others following. Dust rose and swallowed them. Clara exhaled for the first time in minutes. Inside they sat in silence. The fire burned low, the stew gone cold. He won't wait a week, Clara said. No, Samuel agreed. He'll be back sooner. Under cover of dark, most likely. Or send someone else first. We should leave, she said. Go somewhere he can't find us. This land's all I have left, he said. It's bones and memories. And I'm tired of running. She looked at him, and the fire's glow flickered across his face, casting deep shadows. Then we fight. He glanced at her, eyes flickering with something between admiration and fear. You sure? I wasn't sure about much, she said. But I married you. And that means something to me now. They spent the next day preparing. Samuel taught Clara how to reload faster, how to set traps, how to track footprints in the dust. She picked it up fast, sharper than he expected. She'd grown up reading books about ladies in parlors, but there was steel in her spine now. By sundown, the cabin was a fortress. Traps under the windows. Rifles sighted. The mule moved to the barn out of the way. Even the cow was roped farther downhill. No sense giving Merrick's men a target for cruelty. Clara sat with Samuel on the porch that night, rifles at their sides. "Do you think Sarah would hate me for being here?" she asked. "No," he said. "She'd thank you. For keeping me from losing the last of myself." Clara looked up at the stars. "When I got off that train, I thought I'd been abandoned. That I was a fool." "You weren't wrong," he said. "But sometimes being a fool leads to the right road." They sat in silence, the wind whispering across the plains. The next morning it wasn't gunfire that woke them, it was a voice. A single rider approached the gate. Young, ragged, barely more than a boy. He held a white scrap tied to his rifle. Samuel stepped out cautiously. "I come with a message," the boy said, swallowing hard. "Clyde says he found something. A box. Buried near the ridge. He's got it. Says it proves you lied. Says he's coming for everything." Samuel's shoulders stiffened. "He's bluffing." The boy shook his head. "Maybe. But he's got the sheriff now. Says you hid stolen war treasure. They're calling you a traitor." The boy turned to leave, but Clara stopped him. "Why warn us?" He looked down. "Because once your husband pulled me out of a river I was drowning in. Never asked for nothing. I owe him." Then he was gone. Samuel paced the cabin. "There was a box once. Sarah kept her father's journals in it. Maps. Family letters. I burned it." "Maybe not all of it," Clara said. "Maybe Merrick found something in the ash. If the sheriff believes him, he could seize the land. Then we find proof he's lying." They searched the house top to bottom. In the attic, Clara found it, an old ledger tucked in the binding of a hymn book. It listed names, dates, and a final entry: "No gold remains. Sold the last of the coin for medicine. Burying dreams with the dead. Sarah's father." Written in his own hand. It was enough. They rode to town together, ledger wrapped in oilskin. As they arrived, a crowd had gathered outside the saloon. Clyde stood atop a crate, waving a rusted lockbox and preaching like a prophet. The sheriff watched from the sidelines, uncertain. Samuel dismounted and strode forward. Clara followed, hands clenched. "That box proves nothing," Samuel said. Clyde turned. "Proves you've been hiding treasure." Samuel held up the ledger. "Proves there's no treasure left. Just sickness and death. This is Sarah's father's writing." Clyde snatched it, read it with a scowl. Then he laughed. "Handwriting don't prove a thing. Could be fake." Clara stepped forward. "Then test it. Sheriff, compare the ledger to his letters in your archive. You've got the warrant file from '63. His signature's on it." The sheriff blinked, realizing she was right. He took the book, studied it, walked into the jailhouse. Silence fell. 10 minutes passed. Then he stepped out, face unreadable. "It's authentic," he said. "There's no gold. And this man's record stays clean." Merrick's face twisted. "You gonna let him keep it all? After everything?" The sheriff raised his voice. "You got no claim. You ride out now or I throw you in jail for slander and trespass." Clyde stared at Samuel one last time. This ain't over. But it was. He rode off, this time with no one following. That night, Clara and Samuel sat on the porch again, quiet, tired, but safe. "I guess truth does ride in on horseback," Clara said. Samuel smiled, faint but real. "Sometimes. And sometimes, it rides in wearing a shotgun and a borrowed dress." She leaned against his shoulder, eyes on the horizon. The dust had settled for now. But the journey wasn't over. Not yet. The morning sun crept slowly across the plains, brushing the land in gold like a painter finishing a masterpiece. Smoke curled from the chimney of the Cooper homestead, but the fire that once symbolized survival now burned with something new: renewal. The dust had settled after Clyde Merrick's defeat, but the air still buzzed with tension, as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what came next. Samuel sat at the table, his rough hands wrapped around a chipped tin mug of coffee. His eyes were distant, watching a place far beyond the window's frame. Clara stood across from him, combing out her hair, fingers working slowly through the tangles the wind had left overnight. "He'll come back," Samuel said finally. "I know," Clara replied, voice soft but unwavering. She tied her hair in a loose braid, then walked over and set a hand on his shoulder. "But next time we'll be ready." He nodded, not as a man clinging to hope, but one accepting the weight of truth. The land's quiet now, but men like Merrick, violence is in their blood. The gold was never the point. It was about control. Fear. And you're not afraid? Samuel's jaw tightened. I used to be. Not of men like him, but of losing everything. Again. He looked at her, really looked, beyond the soft lines of her face and into the fire in her eyes. I didn't marry you for protection, Clara. That day at the station. I was lost. You were too. But now. Clara smiled, the kind that didn't fade quick. Now we're found. And I say it's time we stop waiting for the storm. That day they rode into town again, not to plead, not to defend, but to rebuild. The townsfolk had changed. Where there was suspicion in their eyes before, now there was curiosity, even admiration. Word had spread of the standoff. Of the widow-turned-wife who stared down the most feared gunslinger in 3 counties. Of the rancher who once buried his grief and now walked upright beside a woman who wouldn't let him disappear into it. The sheriff tipped his hat as they passed. You planning to stay put now? Depends, Samuel said. You planning to let Merrick ride through unchecked again? The sheriff's smile thinned. That mistake won't be repeated. In front of the general store, old man Rourke, who hadn't said a kind word to anyone in 20 years, called out, Heard your talking on hands. My nephew needs work. Clara turned to him. We are. But we pay fair and expect the same. You'll get it. They were building something. Not just a ranch, but a place that didn't bend to fear. And it wasn't long before others noticed. Within a week, a young couple from downriver arrived with a wagon full of tools and a baby wrapped in burlap. Then came Eliza, the schoolteacher who'd once thought about leaving but changed her mind after watching Clara teach a group of kids how to saddle a horse with patience and a wicked sense of humor. Before long, the ranch was more than a home, it was a heartbeat. People came not for gold but for the promise of something rare, honesty, grit, and maybe even hope. But peace in the West never lingered long. It was dusk when the warning came. A rider, dust-caked and bleeding, staggered into the yard and collapsed. Samuel caught him before he hit the ground. Merrick, the man rasped. Coming with hired guns. 40 strong. From over the border. Clara was already moving, helping Samuel drag the man inside. When? Tomorrow night, he wheezed. Burning everything, every ranch, every claim. Samuel stood still for a beat. Then he turned to Clara. He's not after gold this time. No, she said. He's after you. After all of us. They didn't run. Samuel lit the signal fires on the ridge. By midnight, half the valley had gathered. Ranchers, farmers, a blacksmith, 2 fur trappers, and even the preacher with a rifle slung awkwardly over his back. Women with pistols tucked in aprons, boys with slings, and Clara, standing on a barrel, laying out the plan like a general born from chaos. They turned wagons into barricades. Dug trenches behind fence lines. Laid ropes for traps. Every gun was loaded. Every heart steeled. Samuel walked the line as dawn painted the sky in streaks of red and orange. He passed Clara last. You don't have to fight, he said. She looked him in the eye. Neither do you. But you're still here. He nodded. So was she. The sun rose like a hammer, and with it came thunder, not from the sky but from the east, where Merrick's army crested the hill. The first shots rang out just after noon. It was not a clean fight. Dust swallowed men whole. Horses screamed. Gunpowder thickened the air, and the sun flickered behind smoke and sweat. Samuel fired until his rifle ran dry, then pulled his revolver. A man charged, blade raised. Clara dropped him with one clean shot to the chest. They fought side by side, back to back, neither yielding. The traps held. The barricade slowed the advance. The townspeople fired from rooftops, from under wagons, from behind hay bales soaked in rainwater to keep them from catching flame. But the enemy was relentless. Merrick emerged from the smoke like the devil himself, coat flaring, revolvers blazing. He shot 2 ranchers and a dog before walking straight toward Samuel. I warned you, he growled, blood crusted on his lip. Samuel aimed, but Merrick was faster, knocking the gun from his grip. They collided like bulls, fists flying. Dirt kicked up, boots skidded. Merrick slammed Samuel against a beam, blade glinting in the sun. I should have finished you 10 years ago, he hissed. You should have tried harder, Samuel spat, driving his knee into Merrick's gut. They tumbled, rolled. Clara saw it, running toward them, gun raised, but Merrick twisted, grabbing her wrist mid-shot. The bullet grazed his arm, but he yanked her forward, knife at her throat. You shoot me now, he sneered, and she dies? Samuel froze. Clara didn't. She stomped his foot, slammed her head back into his nose, and as he reeled, she shoved the barrel of her pistol under his chin. "This bride bites," she whispered and pulled the trigger. Merrick dropped like thunder, dead before he hit the dirt. The gunfire slowed, then stopped. The mercenaries, seeing their leader fall and their path blocked by a wall of defiant settlers, began to scatter. Some dropped weapons. Others fled. The silence that followed was louder than the battle itself. Samuel knelt beside Clara, breath ragged, blood on her sleeve that wasn't hers. "You all right?" She looked at him, hair wild, face streaked with dirt and smoke. "I will be. When you stopped nearly dying in every major moment of our marriage." He laughed, short and hoarse. "No promises." The people gathered around them, bruised but alive. The preacher began to sing softly, then louder, joined by others. A hymn for the fallen. A prayer for the living. The dead were buried at dawn, wrapped in canvas, names spoken aloud so they wouldn't be forgotten. Merrick was left unmarked, a warning. A week later, a sign was raised at the edge of the ranch. "Cooper's Ridge, a place worth fighting for." Clara painted the letters herself. The land healed. Slowly. The scars remained, but they were part of the story now, like the wind through the canyon, permanent and singing. Samuel stood with Clara one evening, arms around her waist. "We built something," he said. "We're just getting started," she replied. And they were. Because the West wasn't just about dust and blood. It was about rising, every time someone tried to bury you. So if you ever find yourself lost out on the frontier, listen for the wind. It might carry a story of a widowed cowboy and a bride left at the station, who stood tall when the world tried to break them. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. The desert was a cruel place to bury love. Heat shimmered above the sand, bending the horizon like glass over fire. Jesse Callahan knelt in the dust beside the wagon, his hand trembling as it hovered over Mara's pale cheek. Her breaths were faint, fluttering like the wings of a bird caught in a snare. Her lips moved barely. He leaned closer. "Don't die with me, Jesse." Then she was gone. For a moment, the world was nothing but wind and emptiness. Jesse pressed his forehead to hers, her skin already cooling. The buzz of flies, the groan of the wagon wheel, the endless stretch of nothing. Those were the only witnesses. He didn't cry. The tears had been wrung out of him 3 days ago when the water ran dry and Mara's leg began to swell from the snake bite. By sundown, he buried her under a patch of mesquite and stones. He carved her name into a piece of scrap wood and wedged it into the soil with the same hand that once held her waist beneath a cottonwood tree. She'd loved trees. Said the sound of their leaves made her feel safe. Out here, the only sound was silence. Jesse mounted his horse and rode home, carrying nothing but a near-empty canteen and the ghost of a woman who used to laugh louder than the prairie wind. 2 weeks passed. The ranch had gone to hell without her. The hens stopped laying, one of the cows died foaming at the mouth, and the porch roof groaned like it wanted to collapse just to finish the job grief had started. Jesse slept in a chair most nights, boots on, revolver within reach. The bed still smelled like Mara, lavender and sweat. He'd once been something of a legend, back when guns settled debts faster than lawyers and whiskey was cheaper than water. Folks used to whisper his name in saloons. Jesse Callahan, the ghost-eye gun hand, the man who shot 6 rustlers outside Coldwater in broad daylight and never got a scratch. That man was long dead. Mara made sure of it. She saw the man under the dust and blood and gave him a reason to put the gun away. Now she was gone and the ghosts were coming back. The preacher stopped by with a pie and a pointed look. "Grief don't cook meals, son. You need someone. A woman. A partner. God didn't mean for a man to weather the prairie alone." Jesse didn't answer. He stared at the pie until the preacher left. The ranch hands were next. "We need someone to help run things, boss," said Cal, the foreman with hands like rope. "You either hire a cook and a keeper or we walk. Ain't fair what you're a skin of us." Jesse wanted to scream. Instead he nodded. He'd buried his heart, and now the world demanded he replace it. 3 days later he rode into town. Elkhorn was the kind of place where the wind smelled like sweat and gun oil. The train station sat at the edge of town like a wound stitched into the earth. It was a hot afternoon when he heard the commotion. A crowd had gathered around a woman sitting on a trunk, her back straight despite the insults floating like dust in the air. "She looks older than the catalog said. Bet she cooked her last biscuit in 1895. Poor fool must have sobered up before the wedding." Laughter cut through the station yard like knives. Jesse squinted at her. She wore a plain blue dress, high-necked and buttoned tight, like she was holding herself together by sheer cloth and pride. Her dark hair was pinned up beneath a travel-stained hat, and her face, yes, older than expected, wore no paint or powder. But her eyes were clear, dark, and burning. She didn't cry, didn't plead, just sat with her back straight, boots planted like she was waiting for the world to remember it owed her something. What's her story? Jessie muttered to the station clerk. Mail-order bride. Groom ran off after seeing her step off the train. Said she lied about her age. The woman turned then, catching Jessie watching her. There was no shame in her look. Just defiance and a flicker of challenge, like she was daring him to laugh. You didn't? Instead he walked over. You got a place to go? He asked. She studied him. The sun caught the silver in his hair, the lines around his eyes. Do you? He glanced at the gawking crowd. You want to keep being a show or ride out with me? Do I get a name first? She asked. Jessie Callahan. Clara May. 37. No kids. No man. Just a sharp tongue and a good memory. Married. Not anymore. Jessie nodded once. I just lost my wife. But I've got a ranch, too much work, and too many people telling me I need someone to keep me from dying in a chair. Her lips twitched. You sure know how to sweep a woman off her feet. He offered his hand. I'm not asking for love. She looked at it like it might bite her. Then she stood, took his hand, and said, Good. Because I'm too tired to pretend I'm someone else anymore. They rode out together that evening. She didn't ask about Mara, and he didn't ask about the trunk she guarded like it contained gold and gunpowder. The ride was quiet, except for the creak of saddle leather and the occasional call of a hawk overhead. The land stretched endless before them, golden, rough, alive with secrets. When the ranch came into view, Clara tilted her head. This it? This is home. She nodded, and for a flicker of a second, something soft passed over her face. Then it was gone. As they crossed the gate, Jessie looked up at the porch where Mara used to sit with her book and lemonade. For a moment, guilt twisted in his gut like a knife. Beside him, Clara dismounted, dusted her skirt, and squinted at the house. Roof sagging. You got termites or just bad luck? He almost smiled. The ranch hands froze when they saw her. One spat tobacco and muttered, Already? Damn. Clara walked past them like they were weeds. Inside, the house smelled like dust and memory. She set her trunk down, looked around, and said, Where's the kitchen? He pointed. She walked in, opened a cabinet, and snorted. This place needs a woman or an exorcist. Jessie stood in the doorway, unsure if he should apologize or defend himself. She didn't give him the chance. Look, Clara said, turning to him. We're strangers. You're broken, I'm bruised, and neither of us signed up for fairy tales. But I'll pull my weight, keep my name clean, and won't ask for anything you ain't willing to give. Deal? He stared at her, then nodded. Deal. She offered her hand again. This time he took it without hesitation. As their hands met, thunder rolled somewhere far off in the mountains, low and distant, like the west itself had taken a breath. In that moment, Jessie didn't know what he had just invited into his life. He only knew the quiet was finally broken. And maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't die in that chair after all. The ghost stirred. The wind shifted. And the story had only just begun. The morning after Clara arrived, Jessie found her in the barn, sleeves rolled up, mucking out stalls with a pitchfork like she'd been doing it all her life. Her dress was hitched at the knees, boots caked with mud, and a wisp of hair had come loose to curl against her temple. She didn't look up when he entered. Thought I'd wait for an invitation, but these horses stink worse than the saloon on poker night, she said. Jessie leaned against the post, arms crossed, watching. You don't have to do that. Clara stabbed the pitchfork into a heap of straw. I married into this mess, didn't I? He didn't have a reply for that. Truth was, he still wasn't sure why he'd offered. Maybe it had been pity. Maybe defiance. Maybe a desire to prove to the world, or to himself, that he could still make a decision that wasn't soaked in grief. But now, with Clara here, breathing life into the hollow spaces Mara left behind, it all felt more complicated than he'd planned for. By noon, she'd reorganized the pantry, patched a hole in the chicken coop, and yelled at one of the ranch hands for letting a calf wander too far. Jessie watched her like a man watches a fire he doesn't know whether to warm his hands by or back away from. She was loud, sharp, and had no patience for nonsense. The men didn't know what to make of her. She yours? Cal asked, scratching his beard, eyes narrowing. She's here, Jessie answered. That night, Clara cooked stew with a heavy hand and strong spices. The ranch hands grumbled but ate every bite. She sat across from Jessie, her expression unreadable in the flickering lamplight. Is there a room that ain't haunted? she asked, spoon poised midair. He hesitated. You can take the spare by the porch. Appreciate it. And don't worry, I won't touch anything in the bedroom. That's yours. Their eyes met. The silence thickened, not awkward but heavy with things unsaid. I wasn't trying to replace her, Clara said softly. I was just trying to survive the train ride. I know, he replied. But he wasn't sure if he did. Over the next few days they settled into an uneasy rhythm. She woke before dawn, kept the kitchen warm, and made her presence known with the snap of her words and the clatter of pans. Jessie rose with the sun, checked the fence lines, tried to ignore the way Clara's voice echoed differently in the house than Mara's ever had. Brighter, sharper, less careful. Sometimes at night, he'd find himself listening for Mara's footsteps, only to hear Clara humming an old hymn as she folded linens or mended clothes. The song twisted something in him, reminding him how long it had been since there'd been a woman's voice under his roof. Clara didn't ask questions. Not about Mara, not about Jessie's past, not about the portrait still hanging in the parlor. She moved around the house with a kind of reluctant respect, as if living in another woman's shadow was just part of the job. But Jessie wasn't the only one watching. One afternoon he caught her out by the barn with a folded letter in her hands. Her brow was furrowed, mouth tight. When she saw him, she tucked the letter back into her boot with a speed that made his stomach twist. You all right? He asked. Clara wiped her hands on her apron. Just old business. Business gonna come looking for you? She looked him dead in the eye. It usually does. Jessie didn't press. He knew the look of a person guarding something too old or too ugly to share. He saw it in the mirror every morning. Still, the seed of suspicion took root. Things came to a head the following week. The sun was dipping low, turning the hills copper, when a rider appeared on the horizon. He wore a black duster, hat pulled low, his horse kicking up dust like a storm coming in. Clara stood on the porch, arms folded, eyes locked on him before Jessie even noticed. The rider stopped at the gate. Evenin', he called, voice smooth as whiskey and just as dangerous. Jessie stepped forward, hand resting casually on his hip. You looking for something? The man smiled. Name's Samuel. Heard a friend of mine might have passed through these parts. Clara stepped down from the porch, slow and steady. Her voice was quiet but firm. You're not welcome here. Samuel's eyes lit up with recognition and something darker. There she is. Didn't think you'd settle down, Clara. Thought you'd keep running till the vultures caught up. Don't, she warned. Jessie felt tension crackle between them like kindling near a flame. You know him? Clara didn't answer. Samuel leaned forward in his saddle. You tell your husband here who you used to be? Or did you change your name again? I told him enough, Clara said, voice like steel. Jessie's fingers flexed. You have business here, you say it? Otherwise ride on. Samuel looked from Clara to Jessie and back. You really gonna pretend, Clara? Like we didn't burn half of Wichita for less than this? Clara's jaw tightened. That was a lifetime ago. Samuel grinned. Sure doesn't feel like it. Jessie stepped forward. Last warning. Samuel held up his hands in mock surrender. Easy, ghost. I ain't here to fight. Just wanted to see if the rumors were true. Guess they are. He turned his horse, but his parting words floated back like a rattler's hiss. You always were good at pretending. When he disappeared down the trail, Jessie turned to Clara. Who is he? He asked. Clara's face was pale, eyes hollow. No one I ever wanted to see again. You rode with him? She nodded slowly. Once. Before I knew better. Jessie exhaled through his nose. There's something I should know about? Clara hesitated, then looked him dead in the eye. I didn't come here clean. I came here to start over. But Samuel, he doesn't let people walk away. He studied her, measured the tremor she tried to hide. You running from him? I'm not running anymore, she said. I'm tired of running. That night, neither of them slept much. Jessie sat on the porch with his rifle across his lap, staring into the dark. Clara didn't hum. She paced behind closed doors, her footsteps a slow and steady drumbeat of old fear returning. The next morning she was back in the barn, hammering a new latch on the stall door. Jessie approached, weary from a sleepless night. He'll be back, he said. I know. We'll handle it. Clara paused, looked at him. You sure about that? He nodded once. I didn't ask for trouble. But now it's here, I won't turn from it. She gave him a faint smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. You're a damn fool, Jessie Callahan. I married a stranger at a train station. Fool's just the beginning. A breeze rolled through the barn, carrying the scent of dust and something distant, rain maybe or smoke. Jesse didn't know what was coming, only that it had teeth. And Clara, whatever she'd run from, had brought it straight to his door. But for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel empty. He felt alive. And he had no intention of losing anyone else. Not again. Not without a fight. The morning Samuel returned, the wind carried a strange hush, like the land itself was holding its breath. Crows circled low over the ridge. The horses in the corral were restless, stamping and snorting, their unease vibrating through the dust. Jesse knew. He saddled his gelding before dawn, checked the chamber of his colt with steady hands, and watched the trail from the ridge. The clouds were low and mean, casting bruised shadows over the dry earth. His knuckles tightened around the reins as he spotted riders emerging from the east, 5 of them dark as thunderclouds and twice as fast. Down at the house, Clara stood in the doorway, rifle slung across her back, jaw set like stone. She didn't speak. Neither did he. They'd said everything that needed saying the night before, seated at the table Mara once polished with rose oil and prayer. "I'll stand with you," she'd said, voice trembling but eyes fierce. "I won't run. Not this time." Jesse had nodded. That vow, quiet and raw, meant more than gold or God. And now it was time to live by it. The riders approached slow, the kind of slow that screams confidence, or the promise of blood. Samuel rode in the center, coat flapping, silver revolver gleaming at his hip like a serpent's fang. His eyes found Clara immediately. "You always had bad taste in husbands," he called, grinning. Jesse dismounted, stepped forward. "State your business." Samuel's smile widened. "She took something from me." "I ain't a thing," Clara snapped. "And if you'd treated me like a human being back then, maybe I'd have stayed." He laughed, the sound dry and cruel. "Stayed? You think you left me? I let you go, Clara. And now I'm calling you back." Jesse stepped between them. "She stays. You leave." The 4 men flanking Samuel shifted in their saddles. Tension crackled in the air, heavy and sharp like gun oil before the spark. "You really want to die for her?" Samuel asked. Jesse's voice didn't waver. "If I do, I won't be alone." They moved at once. The first shot rang out before Jesse's boots hit the dirt. His revolver barked twice. One rider tumbled from his horse, another ducked behind a hitch post. Clara's rifle cracked from the porch, splinters exploding from a wagon wheel where Samuel had tried to take cover. Dust rose like smoke. Bullets whined through the air, thunking into wood, stone, flesh. Jesse rolled behind a trough, reloaded by feel, and shouted, "Clara!" "Still breathing," she yelled back, voice hard as granite. The man behind the hitch post charged, revolver drawn. Jesse caught him square in the chest. The gunman staggered, coughed once, and dropped. Samuel rose, eyes wild. "You think this ends with a few dead men?" Jesse took aim. "I think it ends with the last man standing." He fired. Samuel jerked back, shoulder exploding red, but he didn't fall. He snarled, returned fire, missed by inches. Clara took a second shot, grazing his horse, sending the animal rearing. Samuel hit the ground hard, rolled, and disappeared behind the water tank. Then silence. Smoke curled from the barn door. 2 bodies lay in the dust. A third groaned nearby, clutching a shattered leg. Jesse moved through the haze, scanning, breathing in short, sharp gulps. His arm burned, grazed, maybe fractured, but he pushed forward, searching for Samuel. He found him crouched by the well, blood soaking his sleeve, eyes wild with hate. "You're just a tired old cowboy," Samuel spat. "You think you won something here?" "I won her peace," Jesse said. Samuel lunged. They collided in the dust, fists flying. Jesse's vision blurred from the blow to his jaw, but he drove his elbow into Samuel's ribs, wrestled him down, and slammed the man's gun hand into the ground until bone cracked. Samuel screamed. "You should have stayed gone," Jesse growled. "I always finish what I start," Samuel gasped. "So do I." Clara appeared beside them, rifle aimed, eyes steady. "End it, Jesse." Jesse stood, chest heaving. He looked down at Samuel, broken and cursing in the dirt, and for one heartbeat he saw himself, not now but years ago, before Mara, when revenge and rage were the only languages he spoke. He holstered his gun. "Get off my land," he said. "And if I ever see your shadow cross that gate again, you won't walk away." Samuel stared at him in disbelief, then spat blood. But he didn't argue. He limped to a surviving horse, dragged himself into the saddle, and rode off into the dying light, trailing dust and disgrace. Clara watched until he disappeared over the ridge. Then she sank to her knees. Jesse moved to her side, gently pried the rifle from her grip. Her hands were shaking, her breath uneven. "I thought you were going to kill him," she whispered. "I wanted to. But you didn't." He met her gaze. "That's what makes me different from who I used to be." She touched his cheek, thumb brushing dirt and blood. "And why I stayed." The ranch was quiet that night. Too quiet. Jesse and Clara sat together on the porch, a blanket draped across both their shoulders, the stars above as sharp and clear as shards of old glass. "I never told you what I did," she said finally, voice barely above the wind. "You don't have to." "I want to." He waited. "I rode with him when I was 17, she began. "Thought he was charm wrapped in danger. Turned out he was poison with a smile. We robbed, we burned, we hurt people who didn't deserve it. I thought if I followed orders I'd stay safe. I was wrong." Jesse didn't interrupt. "I ran after he shot a farmer who had a kid hiding under the bed," she said, voice cracking. "I swore I'd never carry a gun again. But the West doesn't let you leave without scars." He took her hand. "No one gets out clean. But we get to choose what comes next." Clara looked at him, truly looked, and for the first time he saw her walls come down, not all the way but enough to glimpse the woman beneath. Wounded, worn, but still standing. "I didn't think anyone would take me seriously," she said. "Too old, too rough, too used up." Jesse chuckled, low and warm. "You're more alive than half this town. And as for age, I reckon a woman's value ain't in the years she's got, but the grit she carries through 'em." She smiled, tired but genuine. The wind shifted again, softer this time, carrying the scent of rain and mesquite. The porch creaked as Jesse leaned back. "I didn't marry you for love," he said, almost to himself. Clara's voice was gentle. "I didn't expect you to. But I think," he added, "I might have found something just as strong." She didn't reply. Instead, she leaned her head on his shoulder. The ranch, battered but still standing, stretched around them. Life hadn't gotten easier. But it had found new shape in the ruins. And something told Jesse the worst wasn't over. But he was ready now. Not to fight again, but to live with someone who wouldn't flinch when the shadows grew long. And maybe, just maybe, to let love come in its own wild, dust-covered way. The summer waned, and with it, the sharp edges of the past began to dull, though they never vanished entirely. The land healed in its own time. Grass growing back where blood had soaked the dirt, fence posts straightened where gunfire had splintered wood, the smell of cordite long replaced by hay and horse sweat. But Jesse knew scars didn't just lie beneath skin. They lived in the silence between words, in the half-glances across a breakfast table, in the dreams that yanked you awake long before sunrise. Clara stayed. She rebuilt the barn roof with her own hands, taught Jesse's mare to come to a whistle, and once punched a ranch hand square in the jaw for making a joke she didn't like. Jesse didn't ask what the joke was. The man never made another. And somewhere between her morning coffee and her nightly hymn, she carved space into Jesse's life that he hadn't realized was still open. He found her one evening in the garden, sleeves rolled up, palms stained with soil as she coaxed stubborn sprouts out of the earth. Her hair was tied back with one of Mara's old ribbons, something he should have noticed, should have minded, but all he felt was peace when he saw it. "You think they'll grow?" he asked, nodding to the sad green things poking from the dirt. Clara wiped her brow. "Ain't about whether they grow. It's about whether I'm willing to keep coming back to try." Jesse stood silent a moment, then crouched beside her. "You've changed things." Clara shrugged. "Things needed changing." "No," he said softly. "I mean me." She looked at him then, her eyes steady and unsure at the same time. "I didn't come here to fix you. I know. But I think you started to anyway." Clara smiled, and for once, it reached her eyes. That night they danced. No music. No reason. Just Jesse taking her hand in the kitchen and leading her around the table, slow and awkward and beautiful. Clara laughed, full-throated and real, and Jesse found himself smiling in a way that didn't hurt anymore. But the West has a way of reminding you that peace is a visitor, not a tenant. It came just after dusk, with a horse's panicked whinny and a rider in a blood-soaked duster galloping into the yard. He barely made it off the saddle before collapsing, gasping for breath. Jesse reached him first. "Davis?" he said, recognizing the rancher from 2 valleys over. "What happened?" Davis coughed, spat blood, grabbed Jesse's shirt with shaking hands. "They're back. Samuel's not done." Clara stepped forward, face pale. "I thought he left." "He didn't," Davis wheezed. "He's got men now, real ones. Hired guns. They've been raiding ranches west of here. Said he'd burn yours last, make you watch." Jesse felt the world shift, slow and cold. Clara's hand found his arm. We have time, she said. Davis died before he could say more. Jesse buried him by the fence line. The next morning Clara saddled her mare. Where are you going? Jesse asked, heart already dropping. To warn the others. If he's coming, we're not the only target. I'll go. Clara looked at him. You've got a ranch to defend. I've got nothing Samuel can take from me anymore. Yes, he can. She blinked. He can take you, Jesse said. For a long beat, neither spoke. Then she reached up, touched his cheek with a gentleness that broke something inside him. I'll be back by nightfall, she said. Just promise me you'll be ready. He nodded. Clara rode off like smoke on the wind, and Jesse gathered what men he could. 4 ranch hands, 2 older neighbors with hunting rifles, and Cal, who brought nothing but a bottle of whiskey and an axe. We'll hold, Jesse told them. We don't give an inch. They fortified the barn, set traps along the ridge, posted lookouts. The sun crawled overhead like a buzzard circling. By sundown, Clara hadn't returned. By nightfall, Jesse knew something had gone wrong. The first shot came just after midnight. A flare lit the southern field in orange flame, smoke rising like a phantom scream. Men shouted. Horses reared. Gunfire cracked like thunder across the hills. Samuel's men hit fast, brutal, and coordinated. Jesse fired from the porch, dropped one, then ducked as a bullet shattered the window beside his head. The barn erupted in sparks. Someone had set it ablaze from the rear.